Hey everyone, how are you all doing today? It is Thursday, November the 14th, 2024. I'm here back again with you on the Bad Iron podcast, trying to bring a little joy, a little happiness, which I have a lot of because this happened 2 nights ago. My Kentucky Wildcats took down the Duke Blue Devils in the Champions Classic, 77 to 72. I did not have that as one of my picks, but I definitely was rooting on my Wildcats late at night, keeping my wife up as I screamed at the television multiple times. But it was a great victory. I am now a Pope addict. He's the man, and we have a great season ahead of us. So, anyway, just wanted to lead with that. It is a happy week. And today, November the 14th, is Loosen Up, Lighten Up Day. I'm sure you've all heard of that. Loosen up, lighten up. And that's easy for me to do. I was not loose nor light before that game on Tuesday. Very nervous, but after the game, it was easy to loosen up and lighten up. And that's what we also should try to do this weekend. Just don't take things so seriously. You know, there are plenty of serious things in life. This podcast is not one of them. I'll just tell you that right now. If you don't know that by now, then you haven't been listening. And just take things a little less seriously and loosen up and lighten up. It's also World Diabetes Day on a sadder note. We'll get to that in a second. But first, I also want to shout out Scott Schulte. Happy birthday to you, brother-in-law of mine. I think his birthday was yesterday. I think he turned 41. So happy birthday, Scott Schulte. Shout out to you. Shout out to his son, my nephew, Clay. Clay Schulte, I mentioned him in our last podcast as well. UIndy, I'm repping your boys there. Clay Schulte, repping UIndy. That's where he plays linebacker. And last week, I was at the game. It was his last senior night or last game at home, and he was GLVC Player of the Week, Defensive Player of the Week. Helped them win their third straight league title last week. He had 11 total tackles, 1.5 sacks, could have had three, very close to three, where the quarterback just escaped. Um, he had one interception and a pass breakup. Not bad for a linebacker. And this was his fourth Defensive Player of the Week award. So congrats to you. Shout out to Clay Schulte. Got one more game before the playoffs starts, so bring it home. Hopefully, I can get to see you, meet the family, and see everybody for your next game. You, Indy, the Greyhounds, become a fan for sure. Um, Moving along, his little brother, shout out to him. Isaac Schulte, also a great football player, plays for his dad, Scott, in Oak Harbor, the Oak Harbor Rockets. And he had a devastating injury this past week in practice. So my thoughts and prayers go out to him. He just had surgery, broke both bones in his leg. So that's going to be a rough comeback for him, but I know he can do it. He's got his dad there to help him rehab, and his family there to help him rehab. But thoughts and prayers out to you, buddy. You're in the hospital right now, probably walking around on crutches or just taking a good nap. So enjoy the attention you're going to get at school, though, from all the girls. Let me just say. But shout out those guys. Love you guys, and I hope to see you soon. Like I mentioned earlier, today's World Diabetes Day. So, in honor of diabetes, we've got Thanksgiving coming up, and believe it's 2 weeks from today. Everybody loves Thanksgiving, I think. Everybody who's an American. It's an excuse to eat and eat without getting diabetes in just one day. Let's hope none of us do. But I just wanted to share a few facts about Thanksgiving because that's not a holiday I usually look up. So just to keep this a little lighthearted and off the sports topic, this is a little did you know about Thanksgiving. A lot of these things maybe I've heard in the past, but I did not remember. I love Thanksgiving. It's a tradition of mine and my family. My parents are no longer with us, but we used to get together with my uncle, aunt, cousins, friends, whoever, every single year. We'd alternate homes, but it was one of my most favorite days, not just because of the eating, but because of everything that kind of goes around Thanksgiving. just being with family, being off of work, being out of school for a few days. It's kind of nice. A little bit, it's a very unique holiday to me. And it's one of my favorites by far, probably maybe my first favorite, but at least my second favorite to Christmas. And then that's 2 weeks from now. So these are just a few little did you knows about Thanksgiving. And the first Thanksgiving was celebrated in 1621, and it was a 3-day festival that was actually celebrating the harvest. They had had a really great harvest, and so they decided, let's celebrate, let's all get together. And there were 50 pilgrims, 90 Wampanoag Indians. I think that's how you pronounce that. I'm Cherokee, so I don't know how to pronounce all the other tribes. 50 pilgrims, 90 Wampanoag Indians, and it was 3 days long. It also was believed that there was only 5 women present. I don't know if that's true or not, but that's the belief on the first Thanksgiving in 1621, and I believe it was done in Plymouth. Another fact, that turkey was probably not on the menu on that first Thanksgiving. If you think about 500, almost 500 years ago, well, I guess 400 years ago and change, um, it was more venison, duck, goose, oysters, lobster, eel, and fish because they were right there on the water, less of the turkey dinner that we have today. And that's, I think, also where the cranberry sauce came from. Because if I'm not mistaken, Indians, not just the Wampanoag, but my heritage, my tribe of Cherokee Indians used cranberries in a lot of different things. And so I believe that is why cranberries became a tradition. You can Google it. It's one I did not Google. It just came to my mind just a minute ago. I think they use it for dyes and paint, but also to eat. Cranberries were very prevalent back in those days. So that's how cranberries became popular. At least I'm going with that anyway. There are 4 towns in the US named Turkey: Texas, Arizona, Louisiana, and North Carolina. I didn't know there was one, but there are 4 towns named Turkey. I had no idea about that. And then, of course, the tradition of football on every Thanksgiving, which I obviously love to talk about here. That started in 1876, and it was a college game, Princeton and Yale, 2 of the oldest colleges in the U.S. So, and now we are going to get to watch. I don't even know the games this year. I'll probably talk about that next week, but I guarantee it'll be at least Detroit and Dallas playing in 1 or 2 of the games. But I will be vegging out on Thanksgiving and watching those football games if I can. One of the things I like to talk about, and it's a tradition of mine, is even when I'm by myself with my wife or just my wife and my daughter, I still make a full Thanksgiving dinner, even though it's just for 3 people. It's just something I really enjoy doing. It's a tradition of mine. I almost always make the same side items, and everybody has their opinions on what you bring to a Thanksgiving dinner or what are the best side items for a Thanksgiving dinner. What are the traditional ones? And there's all kinds of different ones across the United States and different families and what your traditions are. My best recipe comes from my mom and my grandmom and on down the line, which is a special type of stuffing or dressing, which is another conversation of whether it's stuffing or dressing. The only difference is, in fact, is if you stuff the bird with it, it's called stuffing. If not, it's called dressing. So mine is called dressing, and because I don't put it in the turkey, I cook it separately, although I do use a lot of the turkey juices in my. I'm getting hungry. Sorry, I'm going to have to go away from the dressing talk. But I'm going to put a poll up on. Some of you voted on the poll last week about whether dogs have emotions or not, and that was pretty unanimous that people think dogs do have emotions and that dogs can laugh. But this week, I'm going to put a poll up about what is your favorite Thanksgiving dinner, and there'll be a separate one, not dinner, sorry. What is your favorite Thanksgiving side item? And then what is your least favorite Thanksgiving side item? So look for those, vote on those if you can. For me, my favorite is my mom's dressing, which actually has sausage in it. So it can be its own meal if you want it to be. And then I use homemade cornbread and homemade bread in with it. I do not use the store-bought stuff. I make my own bread, I make my own cornbread, and that's mixed in there with sausage and sage and onions and celery and a bunch of other different tweaks that I can't tell you or I'd have to kill you. So if you've had my dressing, I think you're lucky like me. I think it's the best dressing in the world. So that's my favorite. My least favorite, and this probably is not popular, is not really a side item because I like just about every food, but my least favorite is probably pie. I don't like pie of any kind and never have. The only pie I've ever even been able to eat a whole piece of, I think, was a chocolate pie, and that's not even really pie. There's no fruit in it. I love apples. I love cranberries. I love just about every food, but for some reason, I'm just not a pie guy. I don't like the texture of it. Don't like pecan pie. Don't like derby pie. I don't know. Definitely don't like pumpkin pie. I guess that's the big one on Thanksgiving. I definitely do not like pumpkin pie. Nothing against pumpkins, nothing against pie. I'm going to stuff myself and not save room for dessert. Let's just put it that way. Unless there's chocolate chip cookies in the house, then I may have one or two. So I looked up the top 5 side items, the most popular side items in the US for Thanksgiving. And then one of them is green bean casserole. I've never had that as a side item at Thanksgiving. I can see why you would. It's easy to make. It's basically green beans and like cream of chicken, cream of mushroom, maybe some crushed onions on top or something like that. But according to all recipes, in these states, this is the most popular. Green bean casserole is the number one most popular side. Arizona, Colorado, Idaho, Illinois, Iowa, Kansas, Maine, Massachusetts, Minnesota, Missouri, Montana, Nebraska, New Hampshire, New Mexico, North Dakota, South Dakota, Vermont, Wisconsin, Wyoming. I think we covered all of the Midwest states and a few more there. But that's the number one. Number two is sweet potato casserole, another side I've never had at Thanksgiving. I've seen it, but I've never added it. I always do just regular mashed potatoes. That's the most popular side item in Connecticut, Delaware, Washington, D.C., Florida, Indiana, Kentucky, Michigan, New Jersey, New York, North Carolina. We're seeing a theme here. Ohio, Pennsylvania, Rhode Island, South Carolina, Virginia, West Virginia. East Coast, sweet potato casserole. Love sweet potatoes. Not a big fan of the marshmallows and the cinnamon and the sweetness on them that I think is a part of sweet potato casserole, but I think there's brown sugar cans sometimes. So not a fan of that one, but I'll eat it. And then there's candied yams, which is the most popular one in Alaska, California. We're seeing another theme here. Hawaii, Nevada, Oregon, Utah, Washington. West Coast, taken care of. Candied yams. There is a difference between yams and sweet potatoes. I'm just saying. Very similar, but there is a difference. So that's the most popular side item, which also I've never had at Thanksgiving. The other most popular is cornbread dressing, which we already talked about. So that's the most popular in Alabama, Arkansas, Georgia, Louisiana, Mississippi, Oklahoma, Tennessee, where I live, and Texas. These are very regional, which I was surprised about. Obviously, cornbread dressing, most popular in the South. Then you have the one state I haven't mentioned, and I'm sure all of you are keeping track, Maryland. Maryland was the only one that said corn pudding was their most popular side item. I like a good corn pudding, just don't really need it for Thanksgiving dinner. So, anyway, um, I just wanted to share that. I thought that was interesting stuff before I get into more of the sports and what's going on this weekend. And there was another story that I looked up when I was looking at Loosen Up and Lighten Up, trying to find a story that was lighthearted and gave us a little bit of positive energy going into the Thanksgiving season. And I'm just took a snippet and kind of wrote a little something real quick. But there was this recently, I think it was last month, this 8-year-old boy in Ohio, and you may have heard this. He spent his $300 in birthday money that he had gotten, that he had saved up to buy coats for his classmates, an 8-year-old boy. And this was his decision. So the teacher had noticed that a lot of the students did not have coats and were coming to school cold. So the boy went to his mom and said, Mom, I'd like to buy them some coats. And I want to use my $300 to buy them some coats. And he bought coats for 19 of his classmates of kids that did not have coats. Couldn't we all learn a little bit from this 8-year-old boy? There's more about that story, but that's the gist of it. That's something that's heartwarming to me, an innocent 8-year-old boy. $300 is probably a lot to an 8-year-old, but he cared more about others, which is very rare with an 8-year-old. It's very rare with a lot of 48-year-olds, a lot of 58-year-olds. So loosen up, lighten up. Things could be a lot worse. You may not have a coat when it gets cold this winter. So anyway, just wanted to share that. Now I'm going to move on to NCAA football this weekend and this week. Not a lot of great games coming up this weekend like we had the last couple of weeks, but there are some I'd like to touch on. I had a pretty even day on the NCAA last week on college football. We'll get to the NFL in a minute, which I hope you listened to me and followed me. But the NFL was very good to us last week. So we have a few games this week I'll touch on and talk about a few trends that are happening, like the NFL trend that I gave you last week that came through. We have a couple of games tonight. I usually wouldn't advise on these games, but they're Thursday night games. And if you listen to me today, maybe you want to get an early start on the weekend. And that's two college games and one NFL game I'll get to later. But Washington is hosting UCLA, and Washington is giving 3 points to UCLA. This is a must-win for Washington, coming off a playoff season last year, losing their coach and a lot of players. They basically have to win this game to get to a bowl. They are at 5 wins now, and they play at Oregon next week, which is very unlikely to win that one. So this is their last chance to become bowl eligible. And they're at home against it, and at night on a Thursday night against a UCLA team that is playing a lot better. So this one was a little tough for me. That's why the line's only 3. UCLA has been playing a lot better the last few weeks, but I still like Washington to cover the 3 at home. I think they're going to come out desperate. It's going to be a tough environment for UCLA. Washington's last home game of the year as they go to Oregon for their last game. So give me Washington -3 versus UCLA. Next game is Houston at Arizona. Normally I wouldn't touch this game, but I believe Houston is better than their record. They're playing well as of late. They are playing a lot better. Arizona has not beaten anybody at home or on the road. They've not played a tough schedule. I think they have 3 wins on the season. Just because it's at Arizona doesn't mean Arizona should be favored by 1, but they are. I'm taking Houston and the money line here. Houston can still salvage a bowl this year, and they have been playing a lot better than their record indicates. So give me Houston at Arizona tonight. Those are my 2 picks for college. Going on to the weekend, as I said, I don't love a lot of these games. There's not many highly competitive games. There's one real big one that we'll get to at the end. That's on Saturday night. Playoff implications out the wazoo in that game. But the first one's going to be the #1 Oregon Ducks on the road at Wisconsin. It's an earlier game in the day. I don't know who that favors. Oregon's a 14-point favorite. They need to keep that #1 seed. As I said, they play Washington at home in their next game. And then they'll have the Big Ten championship, which could be Indiana or Ohio State, which is a big game coming up this weekend. So I'm going to take Oregon and minus the 14 points. I think Wisconsin is a pretty good team. They faced Alabama at home earlier this year, a good offense, and got shellacked. Couldn't keep up. So I think Wisconsin is good against average teams, but Oregon, they're not going to be able to keep up with Oregon and that offense. So give me Oregon -14 at Wisconsin. This is going to be a mascot game for my wife, the Ducks versus the Badgers, maybe the 2 best mascots in college football, just from pure entertainment standpoint. Next, we're going to see a game that is going to be played at a weird time out in Colorado, Boulder, Colorado, I believe. And that's going to be Utah going to Colorado. They play at 10 a.m. Mountain Time. Those Colorado Buffalo boys are going to be out late. The Mormons are going to go to bed early. They're going to be ready. Utah's played like crap. I believe they've lost 4 or 5 in a row, almost beat BYU. Colorado is got big heads, thinking about the playoff. I'm not taking the game line here. It's a 7 point spread, though, in the first half. I think the teams come out sluggish. Utah, like I said, Mormons, they'll go to bed early. The Buffaloes will be out doing whatever they do in Colorado all night. 10 o'clock a.m. start when Colorado's used to playing at 10 p.m., seems like. So I love Utah +7 first half and under 24 first half. I could see this being 14, not even 14 total points in the first half. I could see this being 10-7 at halftime very easily. Now, that doesn't mean for the full game they won't wake up at halftime, but give me the first half numbers. Next is Pittsburgh at Clemson, the ACC, which is maybe the worst power conference there is. It's Pittsburgh versus Clemson. Pittsburgh's at home, getting 10 points. Clemson's up and down. Pittsburgh has played a solid season. I love Pittsburgh getting 10 at home versus Clemson. They are good enough to at least stay close and possibly pull off this upset. So give me Pittsburgh +10 there. Tulane has been playing amazing. Tulane is at Navy. We're talking the AAC this year because we never talked this before because there's never been a playoff where the AAC could get in. Now one of these teams is likely to get into the playoff, whether that's Army or Tulane, could be one of those two teams. Navy's probably played their way out of it with the last 2 losses that they've had. But Tulane is just going to be hard for Navy to keep up with. They're going to put points on the board. Give me Tulane -6 at Navy, and we'll see what happens with the AAC. It would be great to see Tulane and or Army get into the playoff. I think that would be really cool to see. Back to the Big Ten, where Illinois is at home against Michigan State. I have had thoughts about Illinois all year. Most of the time that has come through well, but the last time Minnesota went in there and beat them, since that game, Illinois has been on a bye. They've had a chance to get that defense healthy. Illinois is -3 at home versus Michigan State. I don't think Michigan State has much to play for. Give me Illinois -3 coming off the bye after suffering some injuries in games before the bye. Give me Illinois -3. One that I don't know why the spread is where it is. And we had one of those last week where Oklahoma was favored at Missouri. And I didn't give a play, but I said, just watch it. Missouri won, but in overtime. So it was a close game. I believe it was overtime. Regardless, Missouri did cover and win the game. Cal is a 10-point favorite versus Syracuse. And I'm not sure why it's that high other than flying across the country. I've made some money on Syracuse this year. They are better than usual. So I'm not giving a play here. I'm just saying watch this game because the spread is weird. If I had to bet it, I would take Syracuse +10. I think they can hang with Cal. I don't think Cal has a great home field advantage, except when they have game day, and even then they lost. So I'm going to take Syracuse +10. It's a weird line. My buddy Fonte, who has ditched me on this podcast, that's why I'm having to do it by myself. He's too big for this podcast. But his boys, Baylor, are playing at West Virginia this weekend and giving 3 points to West Virginia. It's Baylor -3 at West Virginia. Give me West Virginia in the points. I think this has all the makings of a close game. And West Virginia could win this, especially in Morgantown. So give me West Virginia +3 versus Baylor Bears. Missouri, back to that team we talked about last week, is playing at South Carolina. These are two teams I've had thoughts on every week. One has outperformed their expectations this year. That's South Carolina. One has underperformed expectations. That's Missouri. But Missouri is still solid. They're getting 14 points at South Carolina. I know South Carolina is a great home field advantage, but it's not that big of a home field advantage. I'm taking Missouri +14 unless I hear that their quarterback Pine is not playing. But as last I heard, he's going to be playing, and he's had a pretty good season. They had one He had one bad game coming off an injury. They played very well last week, beat an Oklahoma team with a good defense, put up 30 points on them. I think they can hang in there with South Carolina. They may not win the game, but I think they stay within 2 touchdowns. So give me South Carolina plus 14 there. The two big ones I've saved for last, SEC Tennessee at Georgia. Both of these teams have playoff aspirations still. Tennessee with just one loss. Georgia now has two losses, but to two really good teams. They took a beating at Missouri. Last time they took a beating, they came back and romped in their next game. Tennessee has been a much different team than we expected this year. We expected offense across the board, but in fact, it's their defensive line and their defense that has won games for them for the most part. This is a game where I'm taking the under, which I hate to do that, but I think this is a slobber knocker of a game. Both teams need this game very badly. Georgia's a 10-point favorite. So I like Tennessee plus 10. It's keeping it close between the hedges, but I like the under 48 and a half a lot more. I think this is a close game. They play it a little close to the vest, rely on the two teams' great defenses, try not to make the big turnover, which can cost you the game. And that to me will lead to a lower scoring affair. It might be 24-20, but that would still be under. I don't even think one of the teams will get into the 20s, and they may not both get into the 20s. So I think under the 48 and a half there. The other biggie, Indiana at Ohio State. Ohio State, the last I saw, was a 13-point favorite. I don't know what to take in this game. Um, So the other game I was referring to is actually next week. I'm going to get to it next week. Indiana at Ohio State. I cannot wait to talk about that one. I love watching both of those teams, and the Cinderella story that Indiana has had has been amazing. So we'll get to that one next week. And now we're on to the NFL, which if you followed me last week, you had a pretty good week. I gave out the Broncos plus 7.5 against the Chiefs. They actually should have won that game if it wasn't for a blocked field goal. Broncos covered that one easy. Panthers plus 6.5 against the Giants. Panthers win that outright. My big play was the Saints plus 4 against Atlanta because of my stats about first time interim coaches covering the spread and covering it by more. And they didn't only cover the 4 points, they won that game outright. So there's two underdogs I gave you that won outright. Jacksonville plus 7 versus Minnesota. Jacksonville almost won that game, but definitely covered the spread. I gave you Arizona plus 2 against the Jets, another underdog that won it outright. Arizona didn't just beat the Jets, humbled the Jets. That's one we didn't have to worry about. And speaking of underdogs that almost won but did cover, also gave out the Texans plus 4 versus Detroit. Texans looked like they were going to run away with that game until they started making mistakes in the second half and lost by 3, but they still covered the 4 points. That's 6 great winners. The only loss I had was San Francisco minus 5 at Tampa. San Francisco won the game by 3, made some bad turnovers, had a fumbled punt deep in their own territory. So we did lose that one, but still went 6-1. I'd say that's a pretty good NFL week. This week in the NFL, I don't love the games as much as I did last week, but I do have a few I'm going to go through real quick. One is tonight, Washington at Philadelphia. And I like to follow trends as long as they're long enough and as long as they're meaningful enough. The Eagles have been playing great lately. We've all been surprised by the Washington Commanders. The Eagles are 0-6 at home against the spread in their last 6 games. That dates back to last year, I do believe. But they haven't covered the spread at home in the last 6 games. Now, some of you might say, oh, they're due. Maybe. But I'm going to follow that trend. And a lot of it is because I also have another trend where with a lot of the public money's going one way, I like to lean the other way. And there's over 80% of the money so far has been bet on Philadelphia, minus 4 versus Washington. So give me Washington at Philadelphia tonight, plus 4. They may not win, but I like getting 4 points with a good quarterback who can, even if Philadelphia is up 10 late, I feel confident that Jaden McDaniels can drive them down the field, get a late touchdown to cover that 4 points, make it a 3-point game. but I think it's going to be even closer than that. So Washington +4. My Chiefs, who I normally have the Chiefs logo behind me, lucky to be undefeated right now. Bet against them last week versus Denver, and that turned out to be the right play. They're at Buffalo this week, and this is where I believe they get their first loss. Yes, Mahomes is incredible on the road. Buffalo has been playing amazing. They've been pointing to this game. It could have playoff implications. Buffalo has a steep hill to climb to catch Kansas City, but this would give them the tiebreaker if it comes down to that. I think Buffalo wins the game. I think it's close. Buffalo -2 is the spread right now. It's tough for me to bet against my team, so I probably won't, but I do think that's the smart play is to take Buffalo -2. Kansas City is going to wait and bring Pacheco back after this game, which I think is a smart move. Take as long as you need to. He is critical to this team's offense, and that's why they've struggled. People aren't really talking about that. They're talking about Mahomes and the passing game. It's Pacheco in the run game. You got to run to set up the pass, and Andy Reid believes in that. And Pacheco was a better runner than Kareem Hunt. He just is much better. And I hope he comes back stronger than ever. So my play is Bills -2. I'm just probably going to watch and hope that I'm wrong. Next game, my New Orleans Saints, who came through for me last week, play Cleveland in New Orleans. New Orleans is a 1-point favorite. These are two teams that are two of the worst teams to watch in the NFL. I don't know why, but I'm taking the Saints at home, -1 versus Cleveland. I don't think either team really wants to win, but I think New Orleans is going to win a lot more, is going to want to win a lot more than Cleveland. Playing for that interim coach, building off that win from last week, give me New Orleans -1 at home versus Cleveland. Steelers, Baltimore, huge game, huge playoff implications, division implications. Pittsburgh's at home, coming off a big win where they sneaked it out in the last quarter at Washington, but that was a big win for them. Baltimore's been playing up and down most of the year, but really well lately. Baltimore is favored by 3 at Pittsburgh, but I'm taking Pittsburgh at home. Terrible towels are going to be flowing. Lamar Jackson's likely to fumble in the fourth quarter. Give me the Pittsburgh Steelers getting 3 points at home against Baltimore to possibly even win this game outright, take a 2-game lead on Baltimore. Those Denver Broncos that gave my Chiefs fits last week, -2 versus Atlanta in Denver. Don't know what the weather's going to be. I should have looked this up. Might be a little cold. Kirk Cousins on the road, if it's a little cold. I like Denver. Denver's been playing consistently except for one game. They put up a great fight against Kansas City. And if you watch that game, their defensive line is for real. They had 5 or 6 sacks on Mahomes and multiple pressures in his face all day. They're going to give Cousins fits. Cousins will not handle that pressure like Mahomes did. So give me Denver -2 against the Atlanta Falcons in Denver, Colorado. The last one I'm going to give you is one that a team that's going under the radar, and that's the Los Angeles Chargers. And I don't know why they're under the radar. They have Harbaugh from Michigan as their coach, who's polarizing. They have one of the best quarterbacks who's playing amazingly this year, if you're not following the stats, in Justin Herbert. And they play Cincinnati. And Cincinnati has gotten love every week. And they've been, to me, overvalued. Yes, they have had a couple of good games recently. And yes, the Chargers do not have a home field advantage. So there probably will be a lot of Cincinnati Bengals fans at this game, but I don't care. The Chargers are a 1-point favorite. They are a better team, both sides of the ball. They just are. And I also think they're better coached. Chargers, 3 losses this year, have been at Arizona, Kansas City, and at Pittsburgh. Those are 3 losses that most teams would suffer. And they haven't lost any other games. So only 3 losses on the year. It's a big game for both teams. Chargers will stay in the hunt. They win this game. The Bengals may be out of the playoffs if they lose this game. Believe there's some turmoil going on with the wide receivers in Cincinnati. And I'm not sure that they're going to have their full arsenal of wide receivers. We'll just see about that, Mr. Higgins. So give me the Chargers -1. It's been great talking to you all. Hopefully, I didn't bore you to death. Like I said on the last podcast, I'm trying to talk about more entertaining stuff. I'd really like to get more guests to join me. Maybe I just have bad body odor or just nobody wants to be my friend anymore, but I want to be your friend. So I hope you listen. I hope you had fun. Hope you had those NFL picks last week, and I hope we can do good this week. Have a great weekend, everybody. Next week will be the week before Thanksgiving. Then we'll probably take a week off. Happy, happy, happy laid back day or whatever the day was. I don't even remember. What was it? I'll have to look it up. Happy, 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 loosen up and lighten up. If I was looser and lighter, I would have remembered that. So, y'all have a good one. Peace.